like to call the Rules and City Government Committee meeting to order. Please note for the record that the three members of the committee are here, Alderman Arnett and Alderman Savage. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I move approval of the minutes.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Can I get a granola bar?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, first on our agenda, welcome everyone, is the appointments to committees. The first, the appointment of Anthony Spencer to the Arts and Public Places Commission. You're going to step up and have a seat. Afternoon. So it appears you would like to be part of the Arts and Public Places Committee. Tell us why.
I've been in the entertainment industry.
Mic on.
Is it on?
It was. I turned it off. Okay. I've been in the entertainment industry since 1965, 14 years old when I first recorded. And I've been around the world entertaining and being on various commissions in capacities of governance and planning and guiding. And so those things that have happened in the community with colonial players, being part of that organization, the Kunte Kinte Festival for a number of years when they were bored, and anything that entertains with the arts, I try to be a part of.
Well, I know personally that you are an artist.
I'm also a visual artist, that's correct, a poet, and I gave Mr. Rowell some more information for you. I'm not sure if he got it to you.
Yep, we have
It should look like this.
Yep,
Just
we
one
have
page.
it.
Okay, very good. And also the one that was on
Well,
the...
that's not what we have, though.
Isn't that what you have?
Thank you. I think we know you, Tony.
But that's my professional resume.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Spencer?
I would move favorable recommendation.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you for coming. We know you, so I don't think we needed to spend a lot of time, but we do appreciate you coming down.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Your appointment will go before the full council on Monday.
Okay.
So we're good. Thank you very much for coming down.
Have a great day.
You too. The next appointment is Alex Klein to the Planning Commission. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So tell us why you want to be on the Planning Commission.
So as you know, I've been on the Transportation Board now for about 5 years, and as my interest in urbanism and city planning has deepened over the last 5 or 10 years, the thing that's really struck me is how much transportation, land use, and planning are really different facets of the same coin. And I see this, for me personally, as a way to help influence how the development of the city happens over time. And you know, I think that's probably the single largest, what happens in the Planning Commission is one of the single largest things that affect the placemaking and the vision of our city over time. You know, either through interpreting the current code or recommendations to changes to the code through our comprehensive planning efforts. So I really want to be part of that going forward.
Thank you. Question?
Alex has spoken before the council on many occasions, has always been thoughtful and rational, and I certainly would strongly support him. Now, I do think there's a question. I don't think you can stay on the Transportation Board if you get on the Planning Commission.
Yeah, I assumed I would resign from the Transportation Board.
Well, that'll be a loss for the Transportation Board, but I think you're right. Planning Commission is a much stronger place for you to be.
Thanks. Well, I hope some names come before the Transportation Committee to restaff the Transportation Board. That's been something that I've
Good.
been pushing for.
And please give us recommendations if you know of folks who could
Yeah, we'll do.
serve in that capacity. Question?
Yeah, so thank you for your application and your interest in this. I know I just on a personal level, whenever I've been greatly impressed with your knowledge,
Thank
even though you said I think you've said that you don't have formal training, but
Right.
you obviously do keep up with a lot of the just what's going on in that world, you know, most kind of up-to-date things. So, and part of that I think is related to your the Strong Towns. Do you want to mention
Yes.
what the
so
Strong
if,
Towns is and your involvement?
If anybody's read any of the stuff that I've written, and in my my application, there's a bunch of links if you're interested. But I've been involved with a nonprofit called Strong Towns, which is based in Minnesota. But they advocate for the kinds of changes that make cities fiscally resilient. And I think given the budget, especially it's relevant to us given the budget situation we have. I think we need to make sure that the policies with respect to planning and zoning that we have in place result in development patterns, ways we can do transportation that make the city healthy and don't be that aren't a net drain on our city in terms of the services that we have to provide versus the revenue that we get from that kind of development. So I think it's always important to look at that ratio of essentially public to private investment to make sure that it's going to make us grow stronger instead of costing us more money. And by the way, that doesn't just mean density. A lot of times people say, well, that means we have to be very dense. And that's not necessarily the case. There are certainly configurations and kinds of land uses that are very fiscally productive, but are not 10-story towers kind of thing. It's really the ratio of what does it bring to the city versus what it costs the city. And I think that's a kind of return on investment that we need to bring to all the decisions we make, so that it results in a net positive for the city.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I think this is a requirement of the commission. I think it's a requirement of all state planning boards, but and who knows with Annapolis. But Maryland Municipal League has it's like a half-day training for new commission members.
Okay.
Or elected officials. I went to it this year, but I highly recommend it. I know they do it in the summer. I don't know if they do it in the fall conference that's in Annapolis or not, but
yeah, well,
there's a lot of
I'll
useful
look that out.
information about.
And I think especially for something like the Planning Commission that has statutory authority, it's important to have the I's dotted and the T's crossed.
Right.
In that sense.
Actually, I think Mr. Rowell is planning a training for all of the new appointees that I hope will mirror the type of training that MML provides.
Yeah, the MML training is provided by the state planning department. Yeah,
Excuse
good.
me?
The mayor's office the mayor's office, including the mayor, went to a training at MML, and they brought back literature that we probably will incorporate into our training, if not partner with them, to your point. Thank you.
Is that your? Okay, thank you. I think you'll be a welcome addition to the Planning Commission, Mr.
Great,
Klein.
thank you.
A different perspective that I'm not sure is there right now, one that's needed. So thank you for volunteering your services.
My pleasure.
So I'll entertain a motion.
I move we recommend favorably to the city council.
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
your name will go before the full council on Monday night.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming down.
The next appointment is Dr. Michael Metzger. To the Human Relations Commission. Good
Yes.
afternoon. So tell us why you would like to be on this commission.
I'd like to serve this city. So we've lived in Maryland 31 years, and we have kids and grandkids now. We have one she's effaced 2 centimeters, so she's about to give birth. And
You must be an
so-
OBGYN.
No.
My dad is, and he would qualify things
Yes.
like that.
So,
2 centimeters.
yeah, that's a big part of it. We love Annapolis. We don't have illusions about it. My wife is a reading technician in Tyler Heights. So as we joke, she goes to the Hispanic community every day, and we think this is a trifurcated town, and that wears at human trust and human relations. So I run an institute that is modeled after a group of people who gathered, people of goodwill, over 43 years and changed England, including abolishing the English slave trade. But as business reform, it had aspects of urban planning and rather more of a primitive. I'm a big fan of urban planning. I was noticing who was here before. I'd love to learn more about that. But we really draw together younger entrepreneurs. We draw together people of goodwill, and I'm very interested in what it would take to get them to be able to move and afford a town like this. And I'm a boomer, and I think boomers, we've sort of eaten up most of the resources I'm not sure we're going to leave behind. And so we'd like to make a dent in that. So I'm just ready to serve. William said, I'd like to volunteer me. And when I said I would, he said, thanks a million. And I said, oh, good, I didn't know it paid that well.
About as well as we get paid.
Okay, well, thank you. Questions?
No, it looks eminently qualified. I appreciate your volunteering, and we always appreciate you coming down to talk to us. So thank you for volunteering.
Question? Alderman? No. Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Metzger.
I'll make a motion that we recommend favorably to the city council.
A second?
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for volunteering in advance, and I hope that it is as rewarding as you're expecting it to
I hope
be.
the same thing. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Next appointment is Mr. Jeremy Browning to the Human Relations Commission. Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, tell us about yourself. Why do you want to be on the Human Relations Commission?
Well, I'm a lifelong resident of Annapolis. I currently live and work in Eastport, and I recently co-founded Annapolis Pride. So as far as I know, there hasn't been an open representative of the LGBT community on the Human Relations Commission. So I think that might be a nice addition.
Well, great. Questions?
No, it looks good to me.
No.
All right, well, I'll entertain a motion.
Yes, first of all, thank you for coming down, and thank you for your interest in volunteering, and I move favorable recommendation to the city council.
I'll second.
Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Sorry to
Welcome.
give you such a tough time.
Appreciate it.
The candidate, the information is so inclusive that we don't have much to ask because it's right here
Yes,
before
Mr.
us.
Rao did a good job, didn't he?
Yes.
And thank you
So-
for your work on the Annapolis Pride.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Excellent effort.
Thank you
Absolutely.
for your support.
Thank you. And lastly, our last appointment for the day, Mr. Michael Walsh to the Board of Appeals. Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
So tell us why you want to be on the Board of Appeals.
Well, Madam Chair, I was fortunate enough to have been before this committee about a year and a half ago when you approved me as the alternate member of the Board of Appeals. And in that, about 12 months or 14 months of the time, I've been fortunate to work with Mr. Gutwald, the staff, Gary Elson, and use their advice and counsel and sit on deliberations. In fact, probably sat on more than a majority of the deliberations that took place between last June up to date. So it's been a great opportunity to learn about the city of Annapolis and its unique code. And
And you still want to serve.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do, affirmatively. I come from a lifelong passion for helping out the communities in which I live, having served, I recently moved here from Massachusetts about 2.5 years ago with a life in public service. I'm an attorney that is now retired since I moved to Maryland, and had participated in Annapolis Rotary here, joined with, I'm a tour guide at the Naval Academy, and really try to immerse ourselves into the community and become a part of it. So I hope that the experience that I brought, I've gained over the last 14 months on the board helps me if you choose to appoint me as a full member to the board.
Well, thank you.
So
Alderman Arnett?
Madam Chair, I think you're right. I think you've served more than some of the members that are the permanent members, and I've had an opportunity, more than enough opportunity to be at the Board of Appeals and observe, and I've observed that you're very thoughtful in the way you approach the cases, and I think being a permanent member of the board would be a big plus, so I would certainly support this nomination.
Wonderful. Question? I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we make a favorable recommendation to the City Council.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you all.
volunteering, and
Thank you all for your
as I
kind
said
comments.
earlier, all of your appointments will go before the full council next Monday.
I think we should take a second to thank
Thank
Mr. Rao.
Yes, absolutely.
Will, this was a good crop. Thank you, and very thorough prep, so I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right?
Thank you, Will.
Thank you. Kia, if you have a pen, I need a pen. Oh, well, I probably have one I can dig out. Excuse me.
Sure.
Okay, next item on our agenda is legislative 01418, Development Review Process Amendment. At the last meeting, the committee approved
5 amendments.
5 amendments. I was just waiting for my iPad to catch up.
And we have some new amendments.
Here, you're giving us hard copies? Or that's here, I have it.
Should we ask Pete and Gary and Ellen to come
Right.
up?
I'm going to ask City Attorney, Mr. Elson, to come up. Our
Pete?
Director of Planning and Zoning. And Mr. Hyatt, would you like to come up and join us?
Since you wrote so much of this.
Actually, we should probably start with Mr. Gutwall.
The
You want
rose between two thorns?
Yeah, right.
Where do you want me to start? With the amendments or?
Yeah, you know, we approved the 5 amendments from the council, which
Right.
are attached.
From Office of Law and Mr. Hyatt, we
Correct.
approved those 5 amendments.
So, yeah,
Here's
I didn't have time, I'm sorry, I'm racing all day, so. Did Mr. Savage introduce these? And you
No,
want-
he has another set of amendments, so that's,
No, this is, aren't we doing
Oh,
just these?
okay.
Yeah.
okay.
So
I had asked him, I was talking about our set of amendments. So we are good with the law department on the original amendments that the Rules and City Government Committee approved at the last meeting.
So,
Yeah, I believe so, yeah, that's, everything that we did last week we had already vetted through the law department, the planning and zoning, and opposing counsel, I guess you'll call it. Okay, cooperating.
Okay,
counsel,
so we're good with those as they stand.
Correct.
Okay, so the next set is the set of Savage amendments, and there are 4
Madam Chair,
amendments.
I did have a question for Mr. Elson about what was adopted, if I may, and
Sure.
by the committee last time, just for
Mhm.
clarification.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so, Mr. Elson, so I'm looking at Amendment 2 in, I guess this is the latest of what's posted, attached to the legislation, which is page 4. And these are changes made to, let's see, City Code 21.10.20.
You know, I don't think we have this,
Are you talking about the attachment that says Rules and City Government Committee
Yeah,
amendments?
rules and city government proposed amendments.
Right, on
Right.
page 4?
Page 4. Yeah.
Do you gentlemen have that?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't have it.
It's the one that's attached to our,
We only got it in hard copy. I don't think we have the,
yeah,
It's
it's attached.
uploaded, yeah.
He's going back to what we did last week.
I know, but I can't find,
That's it.
That's-
Is it 9
yeah.
pages?
this is the amendment before the 5, this is the legislation before the 5. Or
Okay,
is, do we
go out
didn't
of
get
that.
we didn't get a clean strikeout copy, did we?
No.
Oh, so I have to upload. So I have to do, yeah, let's see if it's there. Nope. I think I have an email. Yeah, that would be good. Thank
Did you have it?
No, it's not in. It's because the computer doesn't like me.
It's on mine. I don't know
that
how it could be
computer.
in one and not the other.
Does it look like this? I don't think that's.
Yeah, that's it.
But that's not what you're looking at.
What
is it?
page is that?
This is the hard copy we got the last time, which are the 5 amendments.
Here's Amendment 1, which is page 2, lines 13 through 42.
Yeah, right, page 2, lines 13 through.
Right.
Okay, I
So
don't
that's
have
it.
that.
Let me see if I can share this with you.
Scroll up.
No, I've got it.
Scroll up. No, the other way. There it is.
Oh, never mind.
You found it?
I do have it.
And I'm the techie, right?
So we're on page 4, Rob?
Yes.
Thank you, sorry.
Yeah, that's no problem. Okay, so I'll see if I can do a better job of explaining my thoughts than I did last time. So looking at the code is chapter 2110, which is general application procedures and fees. Right. And so this amendment changes 211020, which is notice requirements. So essentially general notice requirements. And currently, when you look at A, which is posting a property, it talks about, has a number of requirements, 1 through 5. Then it has B, which is notice to abutting property owners. And it says the applicant must send written notification to, and then it lists A through F. Now, what the amendment does is, instead of having A through F, it separates out A and B, and then it creates a 2, and then it has E through F turned into A through D. So it has it kind of splits up those letters. Now, what it does, it inserts that number 2, which says, in the case of projects subject to section 211010B, community meeting, the applicant shall also send written notification to, and then it lists the alderpersons, the community associations, etc. Now, my fear is that by separating this up, so basically when I did a search on our code for 211020B, there are a lot of different sections of our code that reference that section because it's the general requirements. So you've got the demolition permits, administrative adjustments, zoning district boundary adjustments, variances, appeals, site design plan review, special exceptions, plan development, non-conforming uses and structures, zoning map amendments. So there are a lot of things that reference back to this, but it appears that by inserting this number 2, it says anything that follows number 2 only applies to applications, projects that are subject to 21.10.10, which is community meeting. Which my fear is that all those other dozen project applications that reference this code will no longer have to do E through F because it's separated out, and it says E through F only apply to the community meeting projects. That's kind of my.
It doesn't say only it applies to, it says also. So
I don't see that also.
Right here. It's in the hard copy. It's funny, it's not in the electronic.
Electronically, all it says is, in the case of projects subject to section 21.10.10, community meeting, the applicant shall also send written notification to.
Wasn't that the question?
But what
Also?
about all the other applications that reference this code? Would they only have to do 1A, B? Would they have to do 2A through D as amended?
the number 1 of written notification applies to all types of applications under the zoning code.
Right.
Okay. Then number 2, since we have this new community meeting requirement, if it's adopted, then any application that is subject to a community meeting would also have to comply with 2A, B, C, and D.
Right.
That's the way I interpret it.
But what about all these other applications that reference that code, the demo permit, the non-conforming use?
No, the only ones that are subject to a community meeting are the ones that are in 01418, which is site design.
Yeah, no, I understand that,
Yeah.
but I'm saying the way the code is currently written, it seems like all these applications, non-conforming use, demolition permit,
Right.
site design, all of them have to go through A through F. If this code is changed, they only have to do A and B on number 1, and they don't have to do 2, because it seems like 2 is saying only projects that have a community meeting have to comply with that.
Yeah, no, it's not only. It's in addition to. So it's not going to affect what currently happens in variances and special exceptions, things like that, where the notice requirements will remain the same. So any application that is the type of application that is referenced in 01418, which I would be subject to the community meetings notice. So I don't have the entire piece of legislation in front of me right now. Go ahead, Pete.
I was just going to interject. I think those sections of the code that you're referring to refer to section B, and 1 and 2 follow under B. I'd have to look at the code. So all 1 and 2 are 2110, whatever it is, B.
Right.
So B is 1 and 2. So demolition permits and all that stuff would follow. They'd have to do the 200 feet plus all this other stuff. Well, like I said last time, what we're trying to distinguish is that some of these things are not only applicable to community meetings, and that's where we would be required to send notification to those associations. So I think each one of those still, we're not eliminating any, the notification procedures would stay the same. We're just differentiating with the community meeting sections that the idea is, and again, the intent here is, I don't want to have to notify all the community associations about a side yard setback variance. That's what we're pulling out of how this was originally constructed. The idea is to, where it's required for section B of this code, 1 and 2 would apply. That's
Right. I agree with that. I mean, the applicant will, will still have to comply with 1A and B, but when you're subject to 01418 community meeting, you not only have to do 1A and B, but you have to do 2A through D. That's my understanding of this ordinance.
So, okay, so let me clarify then. So, if a demolition permit comes in that references this B, after it's amended, if they reference B, do they have to comply with 2? I mean, again, it sounds like 2 says that only projects that have a community meeting, only projects that have a community meeting have to comply with A through D. I mean, just the way this is worded, it seems to me that A through D only applies to those specific kind of.
Well, that's what the intention was, that this is a new concept, the community meetings requirement. And as Pete just indicated, it's not something that we would want to do in a simple variance where someone's looking for a 5-foot setback, an additional 5 feet, for instance, or something like that. That's not the type of project that we're looking at for community meetings.
No, I know, and I'm not.
Yeah. So
I
I don't think that it's confusing, because to me it's clear that all applications must go through A and B, one A and B, and then when you're subject to a community meeting requirement, you'd also have to go through 2A through D. That's the way it reads to me. Is that?
I think I see what Rob is driving at. So it's a regular residential application, and right now they're doing an addition. Say they're doing a rear porch. Right now they have to go through this whole list, including it's responsibility of the applicant to post the sign. So that's 3, right? It's the responsibility of the applicant to post the sign. And what I think, if I'm understanding what you're saying, is you think that's no longer a requirement because it's not under the general notice requirements. It's now only specific to the public hearing.
Yeah.
3 and 4 are applicable to all applications.
That's not what the language says, though.
Well, that's what the intent was, that's
Is
the
there
way
a way
I
to clear it
I
up?
read it.
Yeah.
What would you suggest then? Because
Well, I don't know. I mean, but the way it's worded is in the case of projects subject to section blah, 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 community meetings, the applicant shall also send written notification too. But it doesn't say anything about these other projects. We've got zoning district boundary adjustments that references this section of code because it's supposed to be the general notification requirements. But instead, you're splitting up the general notification requirements into 1 and 2, and then you're splitting off all the rest into this separate, only applies to these community meeting projects. And that's...
Okay. So currently, the code in 2114 through 2130, maybe, something like that, has notice requirements. They're all the same notice requirements. They all involve applications, and they all involve posting, sending notice to property owners within 200 feet of the project, and a newspaper ad. Those are the 3 types of notice requirements that currently exist. Okay, and they exist, as I said, with respect to all applications that come before the Board of Appeals or the Planning Commission. That's how the public currently gets notice. Okay, so what this is doing now is just adding one thing, and that is that when you're subject to a community meeting, not only do you have to do 1, 3, and 4, but you also have to do 2. Do you agree, Pete, with that? Okay.
Because again, I'm afraid this is really going to essentially cut out. The council's not going to get notified when there are these administrative adjustments, zoning boundary adjustments, variances, appeals, et cetera, et cetera. The public's not going to get notified because these are broken out into this separate code, number 2, which is now restricted. I mean, it's...
How are they not going to get notice? I don't understand.
Because the code is being changed to say the only people who have to comply with number 2 are the community meeting applications. And that's the way it reads, Gary. This is I don't know how to logically, that's how this code reads. It doesn't say it applies to everything. It applies to only community meeting. It doesn't reference all these other applications. So is there a way to adjust this to?
Well, we're not wiping out the requirement in 2114 through 2130. We're not wiping out those notice requirements. They're gonna be there.
Where?
They're in the code already.
No, they reference this section of code that you're proposing to change. So where would they reside if you're changing this section of code? This is the general requirement that is referenced by all these other sections of code.
Yeah.
We're making it too tailored.
So I think the things that you're referring to, Rob, if I'm understanding it correctly, and I'm not sure I am, are all in 2110-020. These are things that are in 2110-010, right? So we're not changing 2110-020.
No.
So all of those things that you're talking about, mailing and everything, I think are still in 2110-020.
I'll have to check.
Yeah, that's correct. Right, we're not changing the general notice requirements that currently exist.
Right. So this change is referring to a new section of 2110-010 B, I guess.
Yes.
So here's the code volume, Rob.
Okay. So you're saying that these are amendments to 211010.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, I can see where it's confusing.
Let me bring up the original.
2110-010.
010, so it's adding an 010B.
Mhm.
I'm just looking up the original legislation.
These parts out because this is only.
No, because the original code, the original ordinance, these are amendments to page 6, lines 27 through 14, and that's 211020, which are the general notice requirements.
I guess is
And
the
I
issue,
don't
I
have
think
it
I
right.
understand the issue. Is it because it separates these out for just community meetings? Do you think that this is only gonna happen for community meetings and everything else is left out?
Correct.
So what if another thought, and Gary and I, is that we fine tune this a little bit to talk about the pieces that are associated with community meetings and separate C and D under under 2 and put A, B, and the ones that are applicable for everything else under 1. So I think what you're saying is that we eliminated too many things that we typically do for everything else.
Yeah.
And even though it says must also send written, I get what you're saying, because we've differentiated for this section 2110-010B. I think maybe if we modified that to include just like C and D, or whichever ones are applicable to the community meetings, and the other ones we put back up under item number 1.
Yeah. What we asked for at the last meeting, and I actually thought I saw Jacqueline sent us something, but we asked for a new strikeout copy that had the original code with now all of these 5 amendments. And I think if we had that would clear this up. And either Rob is right or he's not, but it would be clear then what's staying in and what's going out. And I don't think we got that.
So what Pete and I were talking about a moment ago, as possible suggestion would be that we take what is now 3 and 4 at the bottom of the page and we move it above 2. So that,
No.
no?
No, what we have to do, I think where Mr. Savage is coming from is the alderpersons and that kind of stuff still should be notified about all
Right.
decisions.
Like we are now.
Or whatever
Yeah.
parts of the code. And I think what he's saying is that it seems like we've eliminated that. That was not the intent. The intent was to differentiate when there are, because some of this is just applicable to community meetings, some of the notification requirements, that we separate all that out, put back what was originally in the code under item 1, and then put a number 2 or whatever, keep 3 and 4 there, and then make whatever, 2, 4, and that kind of stuff. So we clearly indicate that we didn't change anything what we currently notified for people, and that we are doing certain specific things for community meetings that are only applicable to the community meeting of who we notify. I got it. I
Yeah,
understand.
so and I found what Jacqueline sent, and that's just this. This is gonna be extremely hard to explain to the rest of the council, because the amendments that we've come up with are a combination of recommendations from the planning staff, the planning commission, and the working with Alan to come up with, so the 1 through 5 amendments changed a lot of things. And you'll have to do it, Sheila, but I wouldn't wanna have to explain to the council. So I think having a, new ordinance with all of these amendments in it will make it possible to explain it to the council, and I think it'll make it clear whether what Rob is worried about is happening or not. I'm now more convinced that it is happening, that we're wiping out a whole bunch of stuff, that we want to continue for things. So
I understand it's not clear, but I get where he's coming from, but I think that what it states is what we've been saying its intent is to do, but we could make it clearer. So-
Okay, well, that would be good.
Because it says must also send, it's must also. So,
Also,
but
I think also,
nothing's
I
being
mean,
taken
the
away,
intent
but
was,
we'll-
nothing was being taken away, we're just
Right.
clearing up the whole
Right,
community
right.
meeting
Meeting piece.
concept. So if you wanna give us a little time to put it all together, I mean, you have a meeting Monday, right?
Yep.
Is the goal
So
to get
that
these-
is giving you a little time.
But that means we won't have a recommendation from this body unless you're ready to.
Well, we have already made that. We'd have to.
We have with the amendments that we approved last
We would have to
time.
reverse those amendments, and I think we can have another meeting.
I think we
I
recommend.
don't think so.
I think we agreed with and I think we all agree with the intention. It's just a matter of, and I think in that sense.
The execution.
We move forward, yeah, so I think maybe we can just adjust the execution on Monday. I mean, well, Ross, what you're saying, we would actually have to, substitute legislation, a new
Substitute
one
your
for what's
amendments.
on the.
We're dealing with amendments, so
Right, but what we had asked for at the last meeting was that the Office of Law give us a new 2014 with all of the new amendments in and all
Right.
of the other stuff out, because there's strikeouts and
Okay.
additions all over the place.
do you want a clean copy? Is that what you're saying? What it would look like?
Yes.
Yeah, we would want to be able to explain, so we have five amendments that in principle are doing things to clean up where we don't mention the same things multiple times, make it clear what goes on in notice for the public hearing for this specific public intent versus all the other kinds of public notice that have to go on anyway. And I think when we do that, we're going to see whether we've taken out too much or not.
well, I don't think Jacqueline is gonna be able to insert the amendments until it's adopted. So she's not gonna be able, and Gary, you can correct me if I'm wrong, she's not gonna be able to give us a copy that has
Well,
all
we-
of this inserted in it.
Yeah, well, we did, I mean, we recommended it, she can,
I know, but
She
we
u-
have,
She usually doesn't do it that way. I
Right.
agree with you, Alderwoman Finlayson. But, I mean, if you feel that it's so confusing with all the strike-throughs and underlines and capital letters here, and I agree, it can get a little bit convoluted. I could ask her to just, in this case, show the council or the committee what the actual law would look like if you saw it in the code. Just so that, it's easy to read, and it may clear things up. it's kind of, it's choppy this way, the way that you're seeing it right now,
Yeah, it is hard to,
you know.
I mean, at first I thought I got it, but now I think you've convinced me, Rob, that we might be taking out too much or not leaving enough in, or making the proper distinction. The
So
question is, if we don't have something for this coming Monday,
Right.
we won't be able to take this up again until September.
Well, okay, and in the consent order for the litigation, we have a deadline of July 25th to get this done, and Monday's July 23rd. Unless we consent to, mutually consent to extend that deadline. That's written into the consent order that we could mutually agree to some date after July 25th.
Well, let me ask then. What we have in front of us is flawed, I think is what you're saying. What is it that you can change that would be acceptable for meeting the court's deadline?
I think we could make it clear that we are not deleting any part of the current notice requirements.
So what would you do differently than what's here?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
they
you can
they
tell it.
said they needed to work on it a little bit, but I wonder if we could almost, because this is just one amendment out of the, what, 5 or so? 5 that were proposed. Can we just strike the one and then just substitute it with a new one that they draft for Monday? That would be
Well,
the
that's what I was saying, but I'm hearing we can't.
Well, here's the deal. First of all, whatever we do, we have to collaborate with Alan. He's the
Right.
plaintiff's attorney in that litigation. The consent order says the parties shall collaborate in getting this done. It also says that the final language is in the sole discretion of the city, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't collaborate. We must
Right.
collaborate.
That
So
wouldn't be collaboration.
what was that?
That wouldn't be collaboration.
Well, but we have to try to work towards a solution.
Right.
But if we are at an impasse, then the final language is the city's language. So these 5 amendments are amendments that have to do with the substance of the litigation. And anything over and above this has the potential of causing us to have to proceed with the litigation. That's just the reality of it.
Right.
We're also, if we have additional amendments, I know Alderman Savage has suggested some amendments. If we have additional amendments, they're going to be under the scrutiny of the court if we proceed that way and the litigation continues. The only way that that would not be the case is if we have a consensus between the parties that, as to Alderman Savage's amendments.
Well,
So
then let me ask
agree with that.
let me ask Mr. Hyatt. What would be your reaction to the existing amendments or the proposed concerns raised by Alderman Savage?
Not the new amendments, but
The ones that we
concerns about the
approved
5 we
last
took up last
week,
time.
yeah.
The clarification, so to speak. I mean,
Right.
I think the amendments that were adopted at your last meeting are fine. If there is a need for clarification, and I understand the concern because, as we sit here, I'm getting confused now.
Yeah, I know, it's hard
But-
to.
But the intent was not to change any notice requirements for anything other than this community meeting. So if we can come up with some language that clears up this one amendment, then maybe you can get it done Monday, And then as far as the other amendments go, if I could just comment on them.
Not yet, I think, let's focus on this.
Okay, all right.
This one, because I think we need to come up with a plan.
What-
So,
Go ahead.
so you all are going to come together and I guess come up with a new amendment number 2? And so can we revisit should we revisit our decision from last week to say, strike recommendation on amendment 2, and then that'll basically be taken out of our recommendation, and then we'll substitute, it'll be a new amendment, number 2.
What I'm thinking
Monday.
is that we can meet briefly prior to the council meeting on Monday with the new language and substitute the new language for the old. So we leave as is for now until we have something to replace it with. Does that make sense with our
Yeah,
law
yes,
department?
I think
Well,
it does.
I guess I would like to see it sooner than Monday. I mean, how long,
I will try to put something and send it out to all of you by tomorrow
Okay,
afternoon.
that
so
would
we'll
make
have
me
it in
more
advance
And
Right.
send it
of
to
the meeting.
everybody.
right.
I mean,
I'm
this is-
concerned about
I get-
how
I
we're
get where
gonna
he's
get
coming
together
from.
and approve it.
I think it's a
I
cut
don't
and
wanna-
paste, to be honest with you. I think
Okay.
because it's gonna say all the same stuff, it's just gonna be reorganized,
Yeah.
so it doesn't exclude everything that originally gets notified. That's
I just
the
want to look at,
intent.
I want to know what the code is going to look like after all of these amendments have been adopted. So it doesn't even have to be a strikeout. It could just be, give us what would be going into this next book if all 5 of these are
Mhm.
passed.
not doing
Because I
that.
think
Jacqueline Lee would
I'm gonna
be
get
the
you-
person to do
I'm gonna
that.
get you a revised amendment
And,
too.
and I'm afraid she's not gonna be able to do that, but we'll see.
Yeah.
But we will get the new language prior to, within the next couple of days.
Yes.
And then if we can agree to meet a few minutes prior to the council meeting on Monday, then we can do a substitute, for the amendments we approved last time. Okay? So is that clear?
Is that
Acceptable?
it in terms of the 5?
Yeah.
You're okay with everything else? And then your new one?
Well, I'll talk to Pete offline. I still have questions about the bifurcated process and what you're trying to accomplish with that one, but I don't need to.
Okay,
we don't need to do
all
that
right.
Okay, so the other 4 will stand, and we'll do a substitute on that one. Okay, so now we can go on to the Savage amendments for today, 1 through 4. Rob?
Okay, yeah, and I do want to just go back to something Gary said. Because my understanding is we can introduce new amendments. If it changes something that wasn't subject to the original case, lawsuit, then can't we address those things?
Well,
If they're completely separate from the litigation.
well, I just go back to what I said about if there is a consensus among the parties. This is a little bit unique because we have litigation going on and we're guided by a consent order, and there are issues, confined issues that are involved in that litigation. The issues raised by Mr. Hyatt's lawsuit.
Right.
And so if you go beyond that, I'm not saying you can't, I can't tell you that you can't do that, but I'm saying what the possible consequence would be, and that is that by introducing new issues into that litigation, we are putting it before a judge. If, and I would rather not do that. If Alan and Pete and I and the council all agree, then, to any amendments that you have, Rob, then that's one thing, and I'm sure a judge would just say whatever you guys want. But if we don't get an agreement, then what that's going to do is we're going to get back into the litigation, and we're going to try it. We're going to try it. And right now, we have a preliminary injunction, I believe it is, a preliminary injunction which prohibits the city from implementing, administering, enforcing O3517. And at the same time, we have essentially an injunction against any new applications being submitted by any of Mr. Allen's clients that are the plaintiffs. So that's where we stand right now in that litigation. And we do have a deadline of July 25th to get back to the judge and say we have an agreement, and therefore let's dismiss the litigation. That's what we're striving for right now. I don't think it's in the city's best interest to continue in that litigation. We'll do it if we have to, but I think it's in the best interest of all parties to confine the amendments to those that are directly applicable to the litigation, and then if, unless, of course, like I said, we have an agreement, and if we don't have an agreement, you can always amend it whenever you want.
I mean, but if you have an agreement on all the issues that were subject to the litigation, what does it matter what's added on top of that? I mean, how could they take something back to litigation on matters that were not even being disputed by the original lawsuit?
What I'm saying is that the way I view it, in my opinion, that it's not expected that we add issues to the litigation unless there's agreement, okay? And that would be a way to proceed. And I assume if there's an agreement, the litigation would end. If there's not agreement, then the litigation proceeds. And I'm talking about issues over and above the issues that are involved in the litigation. So if you present new terms for 014-18 that were not anticipated and not part of that litigation, then we'll have to try the case if there's no agreement. And it's up to a judge. So I would rather not let a judge tell us what to do when we have our city council telling us what to do. I would rather.
I don't want that either.
Yeah, I would rather. I would like to keep this before the city council.
Gary just wants to stay out of court. He don't
Yeah,
wanna get
right.
more cases.
I got enough of those. So I just think I would just recommend that if we can agree on Rob's amendments, great. If there's no agreement, then I would suggest that we go with what we agree to. We get the litigation over, and then there's nothing stopping you, Rob, from introducing those your thoughts, in the form of amendments later on, in next meeting even, I just want to get rid of the litigation, if you know what I mean.
So let me be clear.
Yeah.
If we introduce something new outside of the scope of what the judge has determined is the issue, then it could be perceived by him as if we're taking advantage and making it even worse, maybe.
I don't even know how a judge is going to look at it, but I would not want to have to defend something that is in addition to and over and above what is already in this litigation. I would prefer to not have a judge tell us something that our city council should be telling us. And so that's not to say that we can't agree on Rob's amendments. I mean, if there's an agreement, great. If there's no agreement, that's what concerns me. Because these 5 amendments are geared towards ending the litigation, the ones that you voted on last week. And I'm sorry I couldn't make that meeting. I'm not sure where I was. Do you remember?
You were in court.
Wherever.
So,
Alderman Arnett.
From my perspective, and I'm the only remaining culprit from 035-17, 014-18 does make 035-17 much better, much clearer. It makes the code much better.
Right.
And I think that the 5 amendments, with the possible exception of some confusion about Amendment 2 now, makes 014-18 much better. And that's the goal. Who cares how we got there, who did it?
Right.
I do agree that it's nicer not to have the court involved in our legislation. I also have some sympathy for some of the things that Rob is proposing. Some of them I think we do. We do the newspaper notice already. We don't do it officially, but we do have on the document that Pete prepares for the environmental matters, we have the status of all of the different applications. The 500 feet is something that I think needs more time to think about, and talking to some of the staff, it's more than doubling the amount of, it's a geometric increase in the catchment area that you have to send out to. Because it does grow geometrically, and that's a lot of expense. Having had to pay the mail for the notice on the appeal of the density calculation, I know how expensive it is, and also how much effort it takes to put together the list, getting it, thank God for John Wampler, and then getting the envelopes all prepared and stuffed and everything else. But it may be a good thing to do. I just think it's something that can be done independent of this. I'd hate to get it confusing this that seems, I'll just say personally, for me, feels like it's going in the right direction and we're reaching a mutually satisfactory resolution. So I'm all for seeing amendment number 2 clarified. I think amendments 3 and 4, 3 for sure, we do publish it in the paper. I thought we did, Pete.
Clarification, we do for public hearings, but not, what I think this amendment does is require for the community meetings, and it does separate the public hearings from the community meetings in the legislation. So we do it for almost for every public hearing, but it's separated structurally, legislatively. So I think Rob is making it as a requirement of the community meeting.
Okay.
So I am correct. And I would have to correct one other thing, full disclosure. I think I said last time we do everything by certified mail. We don't. We do not. We only do
Regular.
citation certified mail. So we don't do when we send out a notice of violation or we send a citation, we do those by certified mail. So sorry, my bad.
Good to know. So part of my rationale behind making sure that these community meetings do have a requirement to be posted in the newspaper, and along with the requirement to have them posted on the website, is to try to broaden the reach about who receives these. You know, some people are going to go online, and the millennials will be able to get that listed, and the people who don't have internet will be able to see it in the newspaper. It just increases the ways that they'll be notified beyond simply receiving something in the mail, which
that's the clear intent of all of these.
So at least for 3 and 4, that's the direction that was going.
And for the newspaper, we can just bill Chris Ledoux's account, right?
Well, that's a good point, though. How much do we pay, and what's the financial impact on this?
It all depends on the size of the ad. So everything is done by number of lines, number of words. So that's one of the reasons why it's not in the fee schedule, because it changes. It can be up to $600. I mean, for a hearing, but off the top of my head, I want to say they run around $200, a couple $100
each
for an ad. Yeah.
By the city?
Legal ad.
Yeah.
Is that paid for by the city or the applicant?
It's paid by the applicant.
Okay.
Of course, Chris Ledoux has something to say about that.
Okay, so Alderman, do you want to move amendments 3 and 4?
Well,
Can I just add one thing? I'm not sure
We
if
can
Pete
still
said
have
so, but
discussion.
we already publish on the website all notices of public meetings. Ross said it. Okay, so it's done anyway.
Where did you do that?
What was that?
Of public meetings?
For public
We
hearings.
post all our agendas, so we do news flashes and alerts,
Right.
and we send those out for all our public meetings and agendas and all that kind of stuff. So
All I want to do is make sure that it gets done for these new meetings.
codification, he wants it codified. So you've always had a problem with codifying that, but no, you've mentioned me about codifying.
Okay, now wait a minute.
Mr. Hyde?
Say that again, please.
I don't think there's any objection to publishing, putting it out on the website. I mean, nobody's trying to hide anything. You know, we're transparent, but I don't think there should be some special section of the code about public meetings that we don't already have for other events. Like, we don't, as a matter of policy and practice, the Department of Planning and Zoning puts on the website all of these public hearings. But there's nothing in the code that says you have to put them on the website. So I don't think there ought to be a special section of the code that requires public or community meetings to be on the website when nothing else has to be on the website. I just think there ought to be some consistency across the board. I mean, 500 feet's a lot, and it does get expensive, but if it's 500 feet for community meetings, it ought to be 500 feet for variances and planned developments and everything else, because otherwise you have a lot of confusion in the code. Well, I understand.
That's my intention, is to do for everything and not just community meetings.
Yep.
That's why my amendments would be in that general public notification requirements, which is referenced by all these other sections of the code. And that would put in there the newspaper requirement, that would put in there the posting on the website and 500 feet too.
So I think that ought to be vetted separately. I mean, that ought to be at a public hearing. I think you ought to hear from people how expensive it might be. It's not the bad lawyer who represents
Which part of it are you referring to, though? Which amendment are you referring to?
The 500 feet thing. I think you may hear from individuals who want to participate in hearings that, you know, that's a lot of money to spend in a fairly dense area to give property owners and tenants, which is pretty confusing, notice within 500 feet. I get, you know, applicants for big projects. It's not that big of a deal. It can be done. I mean, it really can be done. I'm not going to tell you it's that burdensome, but across the board, it could be burdensome, and I don't think you ought to include it in this, is all I'm saying. I think it's a fair issue to debate and discuss. As far as the newspaper requirement goes, I mean, if we want to walk away with some kind of a consent agreement, if you want to have the community meetings published just like anything else, I wouldn't object to that. I would say that's okay. But the rest of these things, I think, ought to be discussed at another time. That's my suggestion.
So you're saying Amendment 3, fine, but let's do separate legislation?
Because just put it in the newspaper just like you do
Well,
every other thing.
Well, I want to clarify. I agree. You know, I can see your point, but I think in terms of amendment number 4, the intention is to have the same requirement we have for all these other hearings be applicable to the community meeting, these new meetings.
But it's not a
which is
requirement right now. It's just, we do it voluntarily.
What's not a requirement?
I'm sorry, it's not a requirement right now. We just do it voluntarily.
What's not a
The
requirement?
website thing, you know, getting notice of public meetings and public hearings on the website.
I think it should be a requirement. I mean, if we're having the newspaper posting, which is in most cases a requirement, I think we should have a standard that's set in the code about how these things are advertised, so it doesn't come back and bite us.
So Rob, I don't disagree with you, and I'd be more than happy to be a co-sponsor of legislation that does 1, 2, and 4. I hate to get it in the way of getting 014, 18 done. And I do agree with Alan. I think there probably will be a lot of public discussion about the changing from 200 to 500. And I just think the notice, I don't quite understand the reticence because we do it now, but I do hear some reticence from the staff about making it a requirement to put it online. I think you do it, so what difference does it make if you're doing it anyway, having it clear that you have to do it, but there could be some nuances I'm not understanding.
If we didn't do that right now voluntarily, the public would be upset and we'd hear it. And that's why we do it to get the notice out there, but we also do it because out of deference to the public, we have to do it. And it's never been required, but it's always done. So I don't think it necessarily needs to be in the code, but if you want it in the code, then we should, you know,
Do it across
maybe
the
consider
board.
it when we do the 500 feet thing, because The 500 feet thing, I'd say is pretty drastic, you know, and I'm not saying it's not the right thing to do. I'm just saying that, and I think Ross is bringing this out, you're going to hear a lot of public comments on that.
Right, it's done by other jurisdictions, and
Yeah.
it's
But
not a huge
the-
amount
the
of money
newspaper
to
thing,
send
by
out
the
these
way.
mailers. I've done a lot of mailers with my campaign. I mean, I know how much it costs. You can drop it off by hand, have an intern do it in half a day for no
Right,
no
but don't you
cost.
think we owe it to the public to
it's-
let them chime in on something like
Well,
that?
yeah, look, I understand your point.
You know,
I still feel like, I don't like how it abrogates the council's legislative authority to be able to pass amendments to legislation. I really don't like that. But in deference to my colleagues, I will table those 1, 2, and 4. So I'll move that we recommend favorably Amendment 3.
Second.
Okay.
And thank you.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of giving a favorable recommendation to the Savage Amendment number 3?
Aye.
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 We are going to have to come back to the cost of doing these advertisements versus the fees that we're charging. I'm $600, and we only charge $250, right, for filing these things?
For a typical, it depends on
Yeah.
whether it's a Board of Appeals
So
case
for
or
other
a hearing.
reasons, we're going to have to go back and look at the cost basis for the fee soon, from what I heard this morning.
Okay, I mean, I hear you.
And so what I'm hearing is, what I heard is that we, if we're gonna make drastic changes, they need to be applicable to everything, not just this one, not just community meetings.
Yeah.
If we're gonna legislate it,
Correct.
Yeah.
then we should legislate it for everything, or we should keep it as common practice for everything.
we
Yeah, I
we
think
should,
that's
and Alan is talking about consistency in the code, and I totally endorse
Wait a
that
minute.
concept.
That's a little.
Yeah, right.
consistency in the code,
But,
come
you know,
on.
I mean,
I
there's
know,
so
it's
many
an
times
oxymoron.
You're
okay.
killing a whole industry.
there's so many times that we all of a sudden realize there's something inconsistent about the code. This is an opportunity to get it consistent,
Yeah.
you know, make it
Right.
consistent.
Okay.
Can I just,
Did we take a vote on that?
Yeah,
Did
we
you?
did.
Okay.
just one more thing, and I'm glad that we can at least, I understand what you're saying in terms of you wanting to get this litigation off of your desk. I appreciate that as well.
And he has no choice, you know that, right? The judge gave him a deadline.
And I thank Rob for his understanding. You know, it's not that like his proposals can't be introduced soon, just not in the context of the litigation case. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Hyatt, for working
Yeah.
collaboratively
I'm
on
sure.
this.
Yep.
Second team, my son was here last time as the first team, but all along, we just wanted clarity, that's all. There's no objection to community meetings. We've never tried to resist that. You know, good clients have community meetings, notwithstanding the language in the code. So we just wanted to know what the code requires of us. So I think this helps a whole lot. And when we get this next little piece done, then we'll really know.
Yeah.
So thank
Right.
you.
No, I agree.
Okay.
I think we've made it better.
Yes.
The world is a better place.
And we still need a better definition of major site design.
I agree
Before I
with-
retire, I'd
agree
like to
with
see that.
And minor site design.
Right, both, yes.
And residential development area.
I-
How late did you want to stay to?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Mr. Elson, well, you're going to give us, or the three of you will work on some new language that you'll get to us in the next couple of days.
Yes.
And we will meet, do we need to meet more than 15 minutes before the next council meeting?
I'm sure, but.
Well, we'll meet at 6:30 on Monday.
Well, if you have
To-
it in your hand, if you see it, I'll send it electronically. You'll
Yeah.
be able to see it ahead of time, so it
Yeah.
should be quick.
Okay, so.
Then we can converse
Right.
between now and then, once we get it.
And Mr. Elsa, would you provide me with the judge's directive, please?
Yeah, we have a consent order. Is that what you mean? What you mean? It's the
Consent order.
it's the document that governs us at this point in that
Okay.
litigation. Yes.
with the deadline. I'd like to share that with the full
Yes,
council so
I-
they'll know the importance of
Right. I
getting
think
this
it's
done.
July 25th, right, Ellen? I'm, yeah, it's July 25th.
Okay.
Yeah. That'd be nice because we are,
Mediation is done.
yeah. Yeah. Yes, I will.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else for the good of the order? I think we've exhausted. Hmm? I thought we did.
But you did last time, so you don't have
Yep.
to vote again?
No, because we're not going to change it until we get the new language.
Okay.
And then we'll just substitute that language for the, yeah. Okay. So if that's it, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.